Hey people of the VC, it's Andy Cloudy Milder. This is the return of From the Vault. So after I had such a great response to the Christmas special that I put out back in December, and you guys decided to keep this series running by giving me some new numbers to delve into my collection and show the records associated with it. Just a quick recap. I had 150 rock and metal records that were in my collection before I started doing VC videos. So most of these I haven't shown. When I started the series, I hadn't shown any of them, but some have popped up in competitions since then. But I decided to give it one last go to revamp this series, as I say, back in December. Great response. So I'm going to plan to do one of these a month as long as the interest keeps up. I ask you guys to check out the blog post link below. Find a number between 1 and 150 that is yet to be selected. Pop that number in the comments, and I will show you the record that's randomly associated with that number and give you a shout out to boot. First off, a little bit of housekeeping. Apologies to Bill Helmut Diggy in the last episode. He did actually, he gave number 12, but I got all a bit discombobulated, and I credited Anthrax, I Am the Law to Metal Mickey. So Metal Mickey has since been living with praise and adulation of that shout out when it should have been Diggy. So I'm sorry, Bill. Anyway, let's move on. And also, I did notice that a viewer, I don't know if he's a viewer anymore. This was over a year ago. I had to go back and check, but viewer Morepark28, he had selected number 83 a long time ago. This was about 3 or 4 episodes of this ago. And I told him that it was going to be in episode 15, and for some reason I completely missed it. So I'm going to start off this episode with that. And this was a real surprise to me because I didn't realize that this was in that batch of 150. Truth be told, I've got about 180 records that I had before I started showing stuff on the VC, but I was going to limit this series to just rock and metal. And this album isn't really rock and metal. It's by a rock band. It's Queen, Hot Space. They're 1982, their 10th album. But this was an album I had probably in about 1982. I remember when Under Pressure came out, their collaboration with David Bowie, and I loved that song at the time. I was 11 in '82, and I had this album bought for me. I bought this album at the time, and as I say, I didn't realize it was in this in the collection of records I put aside for this series. I've just played it now. I haven't played this in probably best part of 30 years. It's not a metal album by any means. It's barely a rock album. It's a very pop oriented album from Queen. I couldn't tell, apart from Under Pressure, I wouldn't have been able to tell you what any of these songs sounded like. I had no recollection of this at all, but I've just played it now, and I can tell you it's, I probably will be playing it very often. It's not bad, it's certainly listenable, but it's not something that I would grab and listen. Although I did enjoy the song Dancer, side 1, track 2. That's probably the most rocking song on here. And let's face it, it's a Queen album, Brian May's on it. You're going to get some twiddly guitar bits in there some way, shape or form. Here's the inner sleeve and vinyl. Quite like the label. It's quite nice. Okay, so that's my apologies aside. Those are 2 guys that I have missed previously. Now we're going to get back on the straight and narrow. The numbers that were picked following the last video, I think there's about 5 of them I've got lined up here. I used to only show 3 every episode, but now I'm just going to, if somebody leaves a number after this video, I will show all the numbers that the people show, unless it's a ridiculous number, then I'll split into 2 parts. But let's jump into it. Blackmore Rules, you chose number 6. Blackmore Rules, Greg the Egg, one of my best friends on the VC. Very funny guy, but also very knowledgeable, so please check out his channel. Everybody I mentioned, there'll be a link below to their channel if they make videos. So you chose number 6, and number 6 is it's an EP actually. It's Mental Health from Quiet Riot, special 4-track tour edition. This is one of my original 80s collections. So I had this when I was a teenager. It contains 4 tracks from the 3rd Quiet Riot album, Mental Health. 2 studio tracks, Mental Health and Come On Feel the Noise. I wasn't aware that was a cover in the 80s. I thought Quiet Riot's version was the original, and I still love it to this day. It also contains 2 live versions of other tracks from that album, Love's a Bitch and Let's Go Crazy, that were recorded in 1983 at the Hermitage Landing, Nashville, Tennessee. It's on Epic. That's a UK pressing. Not a very exciting label. Next up, number 9. That was selected by a long-time viewer, but somebody who doesn't make videos, but I always enjoy his comments and his opinions on my videos. This is Kid Natus, and you chose number 9, as I say, and that is Crossfire, See You in Hell. This is one of the first records I picked up when I started collecting records again when I was out digging. Crossfire are a Belgian band. This is on the Mausoleum label, and this is from 1984. It's kind of middle of the road heavy metal from a middle of the road heavy metal band, to be honest with you. 1983 new wave of British heavy metal era was kind of flagging away, but bands were still emerging left, right and centre that were doing that style of heavy metal, and they were getting lapped up in places like Germany and Belgium, I think, and Holland specifically, and Crossfire were one of those. It's an enjoyable album, but more sort of through nostalgic eyes for 80s metal, rather than probably at the time it would have been, I think, a little bit of an also-ran at the time. What does it sound like? Probably a cross between AC/DC and Accept. The vocalist certainly sounds like he wants to be Udo, but he just lacks the throat, I guess, to pull it off effectively. Interestingly enough, there's a song on here called Killing a Cop, and one of the founder members of Crossfire, who left before this album was recorded and released, who's called Nero Nerinx, I believe. I probably butchered that. He was actually convicted for killing a policeman, so I wonder if there's a surely coincidence. I don't know, but I do love the Mausoleum label. I don't see these very often. I pick them up as and when I do. They're not very cheap though, usually, if they do turn up over here, and it's not always the best quality metal, as I say, but I just think it's a nice label. And I will continue to look out for them. So next up, number 3, Black Star Vinyl. Rob, thank you for picking a number. You picked a number 11, and you picked an absolutely superb album, and one I've not listened to for a while. So I really enjoyed getting this out and giving it a spin. And in fact, every record that I show, that you guys select and I show, I pick out and play before I do these videos, and this is a great way for me to go back into my collection and pick out some things that I probably haven't listened to in at least 3 years, and maybe up to a decade or more in some cases. So what is it? Yeah, so let's get on with it, Cloudy. Sabotage, Sirens. This is the UK pressing on the Music for Nations label. I showed this in a recent my recent Family Ties video. It's got the powerful vocals of the John Oliver and the kind of the heavy riffs and fast melodic solos of his brother Chris. Um, I think probably the heaviest Sabotage album, certainly that I've heard. So the Music Foundation's cover is different from the original US cover. Um, this one actually came from, found out it came from a book called The Borrables Go Broke. But I think it looks far more sinister as an album cover, certainly with the title Sirens, as it does on a book called The Borrables Goes Broke. For me, the first two tracks on here, Sirens and Holocaust, are just superb. There could just be those two tracks on this album alone, and I wouldn't think any less of this album. So there we go. Black Star Vinyl, Rob, thank you very much. Oh, the record. Always got to show the classic original Music Foundation's flag bearer record. Excuse me. Next up, Dude, 1973. Another guy like Black Star Vinyl, Rob, who weren't in the VC, I think, when I started doing this series. So it's great that I've got some new people involved. Dude, 1973. Funny enough, 1973, the video I last put out was in 2017, and you picked number 44. I'm not quite sure what your motivation for that was, but you picked Metal Church, Blessing in Disguise. This is a promo copy. It's a US promo copy. Not a gold stamp promo. It's a white stuck on a sticker promo. And there's another sticker on the front. I still need to try and get that off at some point. Metal Church's third album. First to feature Mike Howe on vocals. Also has John Marshall replacing Kurt Vanderhoof. Although Vanderhoof was no longer an official member, he pretty much wrote and either the music or the lyrics for just about every song on this album. Took me a while to get into it because the only other Metal Church album I'd heard before this was The Dark, and I was kind of used to David Wayne on the mic. So Mike Howe actually took me a little bit of time to get into it, but I love both the Wayne and Howe eras. I do like this kind of, not sure it's coming across here, but the shiny sort of, unfortunately the glare doesn't really do it justice, but it's kind of turns into almost like a film negative. I'm back again. So great album, Metal Church, Blessing in Disguise, 1989 Elektra US pressing. Thank you very much, Chris. Dude, 1973. I say it's a promo copy. It came with this basic one-sided lyric sheet, and it's on the Elektra label. Next up, who do we have? Vinylizer. Yes, John. Number 76. Dio, Dream Evil. Dio weren't a band I was into in the 80s, funnily enough, considering how much I adore them now. I completely passed me by. I saw Dio as the guy that was in Black Sabbath, and I saw Black Sabbath as being just really old school music that was before my time, and didn't give him the time of day. And I kind of regret that now, but you can't regret everything, can you? I was enjoying myself at the time. Fourth Dio album, kind of. It's not a concept album, but all the songs are kind of related to fear and superstition and dark and night and those sort of elements, and that's kind of depicted on the cover. And the cover is it kind of represents the song Faces in the Window. I actually saw Dio tour on this album, and as I say, I didn't really appreciate what I was watching. If you've seen my video about my experiences at Castle Donington 1987, Dio were the special guest, second on the bill to Bon Jovi, and though I have vague memories of seeing them live, I didn't really take it in, and that is something I do regret, because it would have been brilliant to have better memories of seeing Dio live. First and last album that Craig Goldie was on, certainly in this period, and he replaced Vivian Campbell, who was on the previous Dio albums. It's a really good album. It's not my favourite Dio album by any means, but every Dio album's a good album. The inner is interesting. Just has the lyrics for All the Fools Sailed Away. And we have a picture and credits on the back. And it's a bog standard Vertigo label, but I quite like it when they put the they have the band name in the style of the band's typeface. Last and certainly not least, number 149. That was selected by Vinyl Boy Trigger. Again, fairly new member, certainly in the last year of the VC. Not so much a rock or metal guy. Shows a wider range of music styles, but I enjoy watching his videos. And he so he chose number 149, and that's Ozzy Osbourne, Randy Rhoads tribute album. This is the 1987 pressing on Epic UK pressing. Now this is an album that Ozzy released in 1987 as a tribute. So it's 5 years after the death of Randy Rhoads. I remember seeing this in Spillers Records, the record shop I used to go to in Cardiff when I was a lad. And I always loved the cover. I was fascinated by it. And everybody loved Ozzy Osbourne, but I didn't really love Ozzy Osbourne at that time. I had No Rest for the Wicked. And it didn't click with me until probably about 4 years ago now. And that kind of got me into Ozzy's voice. It was his voice really I didn't really get into at the time. But I remember being fascinated by this cover and picking it up and almost buying it on a few occasions, but then I was kind of falling short because it was Ozzy Osbourne, funnily enough. But I'm glad I've got a copy of it now. Unfortunately, it's got a bit of a seam split at the top, but that's something that's fixable. Easier to fix, I find, on a black cover. It's a live album. I think it was tracks recorded in 1981, and I believe this might have been the plan was to release those tracks in '82, but after Rhodes' death and Ozzy's subsequent fallout, I think with Jet Records, he released "Speak of the Devil," "Talk of the Devil," depending on where you're from, instead, which was just purely Black Sabbath covers. So we had to wait some time for this one to come out. It also contains one track which is kind of like studio outtakes of Rhodes playing more sort of acoustic themes, and you've got nice little touches like a note from Ozzy about Randy, and the labels are just standard Epic, nothing to write home about. Nice inner sleeves, actually, with some pictures of the boys together. In the band, and I actually think that the songs on here sound better live than they do on the studio albums. Certainly Crazy Train, Mr. Crowley, Suicide Solution, amazing guitar solo on there as well, brilliant version of that song. If you're an Ozzy fan and you like live albums, I would thoroughly recommend picking this one up. So there we go. That's your I guess random picks from the Cloudy Marder Vault for January. If you want to see this series continue, then check out the blog post link below. Pick a number in a box that hasn't been selected. It's one of the ones that doesn't have the album cover picture in. Pop it in the comments below. I will include it in the February video of this series and give you and your channel a shout out. Thanks very much for watching and keeping this series alive, and I will see you again very soon. Cheers.